Republican Congressman Keith Self of McKinney, thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Great to be here. Thank you, Jack.
So, Congressman, where were you during the presidential inauguration and what stuck out to you most from President Trump's speech?
Well, I was sitting with the rest of the members of the House of Representatives in the rotunda, and what struck out to me was just the positive nature of Donald Trump's inauguration speech. He said he was going to have a unity speech. He said we were in a golden age of America. And frankly, I think he probably could have used Gerald Ford's words that the long national nightmare is over. So it was a very positive setting in the rotunda. I can't tell you how exciting it was to be there watching the battle hymn of the Republic being sung, the Christian hymns that were played, Carrie Underwood, it was an amazing, amazing event.
So, one of the things that stuck out yesterday was that President Trump signed numerous executive orders in various places. And one of them included, as you know, a national emergency at the southern border, which would include placing troops down at the border, building more barriers, according to what the order says, I would imagine wall. And the president also canceled the Custom and Border Patrol One app, which allows migrants to make appointments. And he also wants to resume Remain in Mexico. So asylum seekers have to stay in Mexico before coming into the United States. What do you think the impact will be of all of that?
Well, I think we will see a dramatic decrease in the people that will even want to come across the border. Remain in Mexico. The Border Patrol told us months ago that if you simply establish that one policy, it would cut down on the flow by 60 to 70%. So I am very positive that this will have a dramatic impact. So there are twofold, two issues here. One is to stop the flow, stop the bleeding across the border, and the second is the repatriations of the illegals that are in the nation. But for my constituents, for Texans, this is a return to common sense border policy across the United States. And make no mistake about it, this is national borders are what constitute us as a nation. If we're going to be a nation, we must have secure borders. That's exactly what President Trump did yesterday.
And you spoke a little bit about, the mass deportations that President Trump spoke about on the campaign trail and yesterday, and he mentioned starting with criminals in the U.S. There are also a number of people who have been ordered to deport, to leave the country. So, in your mind, is that the place to start? And what do you say to those folks who say this is just downright mean?
Well, first of all, yes, we have something like more than 10,000 convicted murderers in the United States today. So, mean to export to repatriate to their home country murderers? Absolutely, let's do it. That's exactly where we ought to start. And then the tens of thousands of lesser criminals, not murderers, would be an excellent second place to start. So absolutely, this is not mean. This is reestablishing our national sovereignty. And that is the issue. This is promises made, promises kept. This is exactly why the American people voted for Donald Trump. And the border was the number one issue in most people's minds. Don't forget, the border security was the number one issue that they voted for Donald Trump. And he is following through on the promises he made to the American people.
You have filed a bill, I believe, that would move the Customs and Border Patrol from Washington, D.C. to Texas. How confident are you that it will pass? And have you had any conversations with anybody here in Texas and even President Trump about doing this?
Well, frankly, the Congress has been all involved in getting through January the 20th. And this is the early stages of this bill. So we've had conversations with the governor's staff here in D.C. But frankly, the focus of the entire Congress has been getting through the inauguration, and now we are ready to go to work. So now I will start working with my colleagues to see if this is going to pick up any momentum, but I expect it to. Because frankly, Donald Trump has said he'd like to move 100,000 federal workers out of DC. So it makes absolute sense to move the CBP to the front lines because that's where the commander needs to be, at the front lines. And the front lines, frankly, in the United States today is the southern border of Texas. So let's get it done. Let's move them down there and get them close to the fight, which is the southern border.
Do you see Texas as being ground zero for any detention centers that are built?
That remains to be seen. I know that Don Buckingham has offered like 1,400 acres to the federal government for exactly that. We'll see how that plays out. I know that Tom Holman is serious about the mission that he's been given, and let's stand by and see what happens now in the next few weeks.
There's talk of workplace raids in various big cities across the country to see if there are workers in wherever those designated places are going to be that are in the country illegally. Is that something you support? And do you think that E-Verify should be passed uh, on private businesses so that private businesses have to, make sure that their employees are here in the U.S. legally?
Well, back to the criminals. We're going to start with the criminals, and I think that's very clear by the Trump administration. The criminals are where we're going to start. E-Verify, I think, is an excellent idea. We passed the Verify actually in one of the bills that we passed in the 118th Congress, but it was never taken up by the Senate. So could we pass a strong border bill, which we're going to have to back up the executive orders, and this is a key point. We're now going to have to back up the executive orders with law of the land, or simply we'll bounce back and forth between presidents with competing executive orders. So yes, E-Verify needs to be in the border bill that we should take up to support the Trump executive orders.
And when you talk about codifying these executive orders that President Trump has put in place, what would you like, aside from E-Verify, to be in there?
Frankly, a secure border and everything that that means. You have to have some sort of a barrier, call it a wall. Look, Governor Abbott has done a good job in the absence of the federal government over the last few years doing what he could at the state level. So now we just need to build the wall. Walls work. We need to build the wall. We need to give the Border Patrol agents the authority to execute the law because they haven't been allowed to execute the law now for 4 years. So this is as much a culture change as it is a legal change. And I think Donald Trump will start that immediately.
There has been legislation filed in previous Congresses that would reimburse the state of Texas for the billions of dollars that the state has spent shoring up the border. Is that something you would support?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The federal government has been derelict in its duty because immigration, people that say it's a federal issue, they're exactly right. But in the absence of the federal government, in the dereliction of its duty by the federal government, the state of Texas has done what it could.
I also want to ask you about, we're starting to see the first hostages, Israeli and American hostages, coming home, going back to their families. How long do you anticipate this process? And at some point, do you say, why not just return them all at once? And what do you make of the situation in Gaza? What would you like to see?
Well, frankly, I am delighted that we have started to see hostages being returned. But if you remember the images coming out of the release of those first ladies, the Palestinians gathered around the cars. They wanted to pull them out of the cars and murder them on the spot. So what I think of the situation in Gaza is Israel cannot allow Hamas to reconstitute in Gaza. They have set out to destroy the infrastructure of Hamas. Now, if this ceasefire, which is based on a timeline, and you can get the timeline, the time frame by which the hostages will be released, and it's several weeks, this will accommodate. But if this allows Hamas to reconstitute militarily in Gaza, then this will happen again. And frankly, Right after the ceasefire was announced, if you remember, the Hamas spokesman said, yeah, we'll do October 7th again. That's my fear, that Hamas has absolutely no intention of stopping their attacks against Israel as soon as they can rearm and refit and reman.
I also want to ask you about TikTok because the president has extended the window for, I believe, 75 days. And the president was discussing this in the Oval Office last night with reporters about, having a 50-50 joint venture and having the U.S. Or an entity in the U.S. owning it. Where do you come down on this? Because I know at the very beginning there was a lot of support to shut TikTok down because of it being owned and controlled by the Chinese government. So what's your thought on this?
Well, frankly, this is a national security issue. And make no mistake about it, it is a serious national security issue. I know that a lot of young people use TikTok for various reasons, but this is a national security issue. It is basically a CCP data collection tool. So the law of the land stands today. Either they divest so that it is no longer a CCP data collection tool across the United States with several hundred million using it. Either we stop that or it will shut down. And President Trump has simply given them an opportunity to divest the CCP interest in TikTok. And that's what the law of the land stands, and the law of the land will operate at whatever time that the presidential executive order expires. So I encourage whoever is going to take over TikTok, and I understand there's at least one offer been made already, but we must, and again, this is the key point, this TikTok is a data collection system by the Chinese Communist Party, and that's what we must fix, regardless of how long that takes.
Two other questions. One, the president also declared an emergency on energy. What do you take that to mean, and what would you like to see take place now?
Well, frankly, the Biden administration has allowed Russia and Iran to sell oil on the open market. So what we need to do is we need to use the weapon that we have underneath our feet, that black gold, the gas and oil industry. We need to use it as an economic tool to make sure that our interests, the U.S. national interests, are codified around the world. And I will tell you that when he says drill, baby, drill, the gas and oil industry has done a great job in spite of the Biden administration. Now, with the support of the Trump administration, I believe that we will once again reach energy dominance, and we will be able to supply our allies and cut off our adversaries from selling their illicit oil around the world. So this is a very important point, because energy is the very foundation of civilization, and we can be the energy dominant nation around the world. We have more reserves than any nation. OPEC has lost its ability to set the price. So if we simply support our gas and oil industry, it'll make us energy dominant.
And the impact on prices would be to lower them for Americans?
Absolutely. Of course, it's a simple supply and demand. I heard the CEOs of several of the large oil companies at a meeting just a couple of days ago, and they said it's basically supply and demand. We pump more, we'll have more supply. The demand will lower prices. So yeah, if we supply the market with more gas and oil, not only will it lower our prices, but it will support our allies around the world.
And my last question to you pertains to Speaker Johnson. I know during the vote back on January 3rd, initially you had backed Byron Donalds, and then you changed and voted for Speaker Mike Johnson. And I read that you had a conversation with President-elect Trump at that point. What did you discuss? What did he say to you?
Well, frankly, I told both Speaker Johnson and Donald Trump before the vote what I was going to do. My whole point was, how are we stronger than we were in the 118th Congress supporting the Trump agenda in the 119th Congress, where we are today? Because we have got to be stronger. We passed bills with Democrat votes. In fact, a vast majority of the most important bills in the 118th Congress the last 2 years were passed with Democrat votes, not as a Republican majority. And I don't think the Democrats are going to support the Trump agenda these 2 years, which means we are going to have better bills. We're going to have to be stronger. We're going to have bills that support the Trump agenda. And that was my whole case. I knew that Mike Johnson was going to be the speaker, but we had to make the point. We must do better in the 119th Congress than we did during the 118th Congress.
And did you gain any, promises from the two of them?
Well, I say assurances, but we'll see how those work out, because there were no promises, there were assurances, and frankly, we'll have to see how that works. But in the meantime, we have got to be stronger supporting the Trump agenda. This is what we are about. This is why the people sent us a unified government, House, Senate, and the presidency, to make sure that the Trump agenda is successful.
Congressman Keith Self of McKinney, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.